Awesome. So we'll get started. So this is our webinar number 2. The topic is basically decoding plant-based meat, getting an overview of a similar deck resource that was provided to all of you in phase 1 of the challenge. I'm not sure. I think it was in week 2. I think it was a recommended resource. So most of you must have gone through it and also probably taken a quiz related to it. If not, we'll learn a lot about that deck, and you can always ask some of your questions, like I said, to Siddharth Bhide, who's a science and technology specialist. Siddharth is also a food scientist and has a lot of experience of working in this domain. He spent more than a couple of years at Just, in their product development and science and technology team. He was pivotal and instrumental in getting a patent over the some of the key processes of the Just Egg as a product. And today evening, thank you so much for taking time out from your busy schedules. And we have few more webinars lined up for you, in this series. And all of them are going to be very, very important for understanding different aspects of this sector. So without further delay, I would request Siddharth to present his deck so that we can get started with the Q&A bit.
Thank you, Shardul. Wait 1 second. Let me share my screen. Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes, it's in presenter's view right now.
Is it still in presenter's view? Yeah.
Awesome.
So
All
sorry,
right,
I'm
go on.
just hitting technical difficulties right now. Attending today's webinar, and thank you for your interest in the Smart Protein Innovation Challenge. I think as Shardul must have mentioned, it is the need of the hour, and we are very glad that you are participating in this challenge and developing some really innovative products. So I'm here today to do my bit a little, trying to just give you guys an overview of plant-based meat, the sector and the technology. And most of you might have gone through this tech earlier in your reading materials, but I'll just walk through it again in about 40 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A session. Okay, so the agenda for today, I'll just be introducing myself. Post that, I'll be defining plant-based meat. Post that, we'll be talking about the 3 stages to creating plant-based meat. And usually we classify it into crop optimization. How can you have the best crops, which will help you create the best plant-based meat products? Post that, we'll be talking about raw materials in creating plant-based meat and how you could optimize the raw materials to get the maximum functionality, the best organoleptic properties, and the best nutritional value. Post that, we'll be talking about, once you have your ingredients, what are the different processes you can use to texturize the proteins and make that really good plant-based meat-like structure. Then we'll be looking at 2 case studies, 2 products out there in the market, which could be called the gold standard in this segment, the Beyond Burger and the Impossible Burger. And post that, we'll be talking about the market around the globe and in India, and why it is a good time to be in this segment. And then post that, we'll have a Q&A. So as Shardul mentioned, my name is Siddharth Bhide. I'm a food technologist by training too. I got my BTech degree in food technology from Usmania University in Hyderabad. Post that, I went to the US. I got my master's in food science at Rutgers. I worked in the domain of food safety for my master's research, and I published a paper on cold plasma technology and how it can be used to inactivate microorganisms on food surfaces. Post that, I interned with General Mills in Minneapolis for 2 summers on their Fiber One brownie brand, doing product development uh, one summer and then doing some quality assurance work the next summer. Post that, got a job with Just, formerly known as Hampton Creek, based in San Francisco. I was a part of their team making the Just Egg, so I was involved in isolating protein from moong dal, and post that doing product development with it and then scaling up the product. and I've been with the Good Food Institute since July 2019, so a little over a year now. And I'm glad to contribute to the sector in India now and also around the globe. So, what is plant based meat? So, by definition, plant based meat is a product that closely resembles animal based meat in its organoleptic properties using a combination of one or more alternative protein ingredients. And on your screen, you see a few products in this category. You see the Impossible Burgers patty, you see the Beyond Sausage, you see a product made by a Dutch brand called Oja, which is again a plant based chicken product. And you can see how all of them look very similar to their animal counterparts. Now, when it comes to plant-based meat, initially, you can start off with, your dals and your legumes, what you have, because this is the raw material and you can make the products from there. And then initially, when this segment did not exist, but still people consumed like vegetable patties or, vegetable burgers, the idea was a lot of times the substitute that was used was tofu, tempeh, seitan. But this is not what we define as plant-based meat. Neither is it the black bean burgers, which came as version 2 of the tofu, tempeh, seitan, because these are also not similar to the animal products in terms of their organoleptic properties. What we are talking about right now, plant-based meats are higher versions, which replicate the animal products in terms of texture, in terms of flavor. Now, when it comes to alternative proteins, there are three segments. One are plant-based proteins, which we'll be talking about in today's lecture. But then the second segment is also called proteins that you can make via fermentation. Now, these could be, you can ferment algae or you can ferment, like fungal proteins, and you can use the whole biomass as your protein source. Or you can use what certain companies are doing. You could use the microbes to develop a certain protein, and this protein can be your functional protein. So, for example, Perfect Day is using microorganisms to actually create milk proteins, which they combine with plant-based fats, etc., to create like a hybrid plant and fermentation-based milk products, etc. So there are two aspects of fermentation. And if you would like more information of this segment, please feel free to go to our website, and you'll find a really good white paper on it. The third segment is animal cell culture, cultivated meat, egg, dairy products, as we call it, wherein you actually use cells harvested from animals and then grow it outside the body. And this is also a very interesting field and a lot of scope in this field for development too. Okay, so now focusing on plant-based proteins and plant-based meat for this lecture. So you have your crops from where you get your plant proteins, and then you have your final plant-based meat product. But there are a lot of steps that need to happen from point A to point B in order for you to get a really acceptable and superior plant-based meat products. And today we'll be talking about what are these steps exactly in creating this product. So as I mentioned earlier, usually we classify it into three buckets. The first bucket, as you see to your left, is crop optimization, which is where what you do is you first select the best crop that you can use to make your product. And there is a lot of research going on in this area where different plant breeding techniques are being worked upon or researched upon to see if we can increase the functionality of crops. And I'll give you an example to make it more easier. So currently soy protein and wheat protein are being used, right, to make plant-based meat products. And you see that, the plant-based meat products are similar to their animal counterparts, but still not there. When you, bite into these products, you'll feel that they are still dry. They don't retain water very well. They still lack the fatty mouthfeel. So they are not very good emulsifiers, etc. So there are research groups around the world who are trying to breed soy in such a way such that it has a higher emulsification capacity or a higher water holding capacity. And this is what I mean by crop optimization. So optimizing the crops to increase their functionality. Certain groups are also looking at, how can I increase the amino acid profile of this crop such that it's a complete protein, like animal proteins, etc. So very interesting field to work in, and I'll show you a few companies which are working in this segment too. The second one is raw material optimization. So once you select your crop, you still need to extract protein from it. You still need to extract fats from it. And this is where raw material optimization comes in. And this is a huge field, because raw materials form the backbone of your final product. And it's very important that you optimize your raw materials to give you the best organoleptic properties. The third step is end product optimization. So once you have all your raw materials in, your protein would still be in a powder form, right? But when you're making your final product, and as you see the picture on your screen, it's fibrated. It has got a lot of structures in the form of like strings, etc. So how do you convert this protein powder into such type of structure that resembles animal meat? Is a very interesting concept too, and there are different technologies that you can use to do it. And extrusion is one common technology that you guys must already be knowing. So starting with crop analysis and optimization, what you see over here is different bucket areas where you can do research in order to contribute to crop analysis and optimization. So you can look at functional analysis, and you can think about this, right? There are like over thousands of species of plants out there in the world, but there are just a handful which are currently being used to make food products. So there is a lot of scope in here. And even when we are talking about any crop, right, there is still, let's take for example something like millets or something like fava bean or chickpeas, etc. There is still a big white space opportunity. No one has really worked on understanding what is the emulsification capacity of chickpeas, what is the foaming capacity of chickpeas, what is the gelation capacity of chickpeas. And having all this data will actually lead to creation of more ingredients that can contribute to making of final products. So this is a big white space opportunity, functional analysis of crops. Second is, trait mapping, digital phenotyping, gene editing. So basically understanding the different traits and then linking them together to finally get a crop that is very functional is what that means. High throughput breeding. A lot of times, we have to wait for an entire cropping season to get certain crops. But then, there are also certain methods of high throughput breeding through which breeding can be fastened, because of which you'll have more raw material in per year, which is always a great thing. Because a lot of times what happens is, if plant-based meat really takes off, and it is taking off right now, your raw materials could be bottlenecks, if they are not produced in enough quantities that your final end product requires. So this is very interesting. And secondly, also through high throughput breeding method, it can also accelerate your research. Novel ingredients,
Just
and
a
this is
quick point to add here, actually, for everyone, all of these points that Siddharth is telling, like all of these are opportunity areas for ideation, right? I mean, not just this deck, all the aspects mentioned in the plant-based meat mind map, the paper that was one of the resources, and also obviously everything that Siddharth will cover today. All of these could be very good areas for innovation. You can think indigenous, you can think about context specific to India in each of these categories. So people who wrote to me, for example, with questions like everybody's thinking or everybody might think in similar direction, I beg to differ, because there's just so much area for innovation. So many new things could be thought of, that I think this webinar would, if you just keep your eyes and ears open and think better, if you've still not arrived at a specific idea for your proposal, this might be a great opportunity to do that, either in category one, which is plant-based meats, or even category five, which is plant-based ingredients that go into making some of these things, solutions, plant farming solutions. So yeah, just keep an open eye. Thank you. Just that's something I wanted to add to that. Please continue. Sorry to disturb.
No, thank you, Shardul. An excellent point. As Shardul was mentioning, as you are developing your plant-based ingredients or plant-based meat products, instead of thinking about, regular soy or wheat or etc., think about crops which are indigenous to India, right? Think about chickpeas, pigeon peas, millets. Research papers, wherein they have tried to see if there are any functional traits to these crops, and if they can be used in alternative protein products. I think that would be a big value add, and if this idea really works, that would be a very big stimulus to India's indigenous crops too. So, some plant protein sources observed so far in plant-based meat products around the globe. And, as you can see, legumes and pulses, because they are high in protein, and protein is the main functional ingredient in these products. You'll see products made from soy, pea, chickpeas picking up a little bit. Fava bean, mung bean are also picking up a little bit. Grains like wheat, wheat gluten is used in a lot of these plant-based meat products for the kind of layering structure that it provides. Rice protein and quinoa protein are also being worked on by different companies, trying to see if they are functional and can be used. Seeds are an interesting source, because not only can their protein be utilized in the product, but also their oils or fats can be utilized in their products, which is always great, because the more you can have a biorefinery type of a approach to making your ingredients and your final product, the more cost effective would it be. Potato protein is interesting. Potato is typically not high in protein, but people have found that there are very functional proteins inside a potato. So you can look at companies around the globe which are using potato not as a bulk ingredient, but as they add it in minute quantities for the functional properties that it provides. And this is essentially what I was telling you, like, typically crops which are high in protein are used to make plant-based meat products. And typically these come under the category of pulses, legumes, etc. And yellow field peas, an example. Peas being worked a lot around the globe because soy kind of takes a beating because of its allergenicity that it has. And wheat has been there for a long time, and people want to avoid gluten. That's why, which is the reason why peas is picking up around the globe. Even though peas picking around the globe, you can see that it is still around 10% in terms of the global share, but soy is still dominating at 60%, and this also has to do because soy has been optimized for centuries, whereas other crops are still upcoming. But which is great because this just means that other crops that are being worked on are going to be functionalized soon too, and if their cost economics can be worked out, and if they are really functional enough, they'll take a big they'll see a big rise in this sector too. An interesting thing to also note is that a lot of times, soy protein or the wheat protein that is out in the market, it was not optimized for the protein itself. So soy was essentially optimized for the soybean oil. People didn't want protein from soy, people wanted oil from soy. So they designed all their processes and they designed their breeding so that the soy crop initially has the highest oil content, and followed by they could extract the maximum oil from it. And whatever byproduct they got was soy protein. And what happened in this process was that the protein gets denatured in this process, because when I'm extracting for oil, I'm using like really strenuous like oil extraction, solvent extraction techniques which can denature my protein, but still this soy protein is functional enough to be used in plant-based meat products. So an approach which a lot of companies are now taking is that they are breeding soy and then fractionating soy for its protein but not for its oil, and in this way they are increasing the functionality of the soy protein what you get. Same is the case with wheat. Wheat was always optimized for its carbohydrates, but never the protein. But now even companies are changing approach because of this growing segment of plant-based meat products. Pea also, it first started off with pea starch, but now pea protein is also picking up and is as important as pea starch. So optimizing the crop with the end product in mind. Initially, it was always the oil or the carbohydrates, but now companies are realizing the big potential in the alternative protein segment, and they are actually optimizing for plant-based proteins. And this is what I was talking about. A lot of techniques are going in to increase the performance of crops, to increase the functionality of crops, to increase the nutrition of crops, while at the same time trying to drop the cost of these crops. And here are a few companies around the globe which are doing phenomenal work in this segment. So there is a company in Israel called Equinom, which is essentially breeding crops which have superior nutrition profiles. A common complaint with plant-based products or plant-based proteins is that they are not complete proteins. So they lack, certain essential amino acids, or they are not digestible enough, because of which, in general, they are not as high in quality as their animal-based counterparts. But companies are coming up with innovative techniques to actually increase the amino acid content, or better the amino acid profile of these crops, which is great, because of which now they become complete proteins or very close to complete proteins. So they are also in the same nutrition range as their animal-based counterparts. Benson Hill is a company based in the United States, which is actually making extremely high protein soybeans. So essentially having protein greater than 50%. And if you think about it, right now, currently, if you look at soybean, my protein content in soybean is about 20-30%. So I still need to do an entire protein fractionation to make that 30% of protein to greater than 80%, which I can then use in my plant-based meat products. But then if I actually make soybeans, which have a higher protein content, I can skip or reduce my entire protein fractionation step, which leads to a lot of cost savings. Okay, so now once you have kind of decided which crop you want to use, and optimize that crop for its functionality or nutrition profiles, organoleptic properties, etc. The next thing is, how do you extract protein from it? Because in your plant-based meat product, the proteins are your functional ingredient. So you need to extract proteins from it, and there are different ways of going about it. There are mechanical methods, like filtration, wherein you separate the proteins based on their sizes. There are chemical methods like solvent extraction, etc., where you separate it based on their pH or the acidity levels. And it's very interesting. Sometimes the protein extracts what you get, they are not functional enough. So there are also techniques that you can use, like high pressure homogenization, or enzymatic methods wherein you can increase their functionalities and make them better emulsifiers or better foaming agents or better gelation agents, etc. So here is also another big opportunity area for you guys as you're working on your proposal. So even if you're say working with the traditional crops, right, like soy or wheat or etc., to make your final product or to make your plant-based ingredient, do more research on methods which can be used to increase the yield of protein extraction, so that your cost economics becomes better. Or and follow it up with, if you can use certain methods, functionalization methods like enzymatic treatments or homogenization or etc., to increase the functionality of your ingredients, which can then be used to create truly functional products. And here is a flowchart, and this is found in one of GFI's white paper resources, and I'm just going to walk through it briefly. So essentially, you have your seed in which there is protein when it comes to plants. The first thing you do is remove the non-edible hull separately, and then you get the seed part out of it. Post this, you mill it to create a flour. Post this, you extract oil from it using solvent extraction methods. Post this, you get what is known as flour, a defatted flour, and this I can subject it to different protein extraction protocols. Now these could be filtration methods, this could be pH, acidity regulation methods, etc. And using this I get my protein stream, which is what I need. But at the same time, I'm also going to be getting a, a starch stream, a sugar stream, a fiber stream, etc. So another interesting opportunity for you guys, right? In terms of for the cost economics to work for any crop, not only do you need to utilize the protein in it, you also need to utilize the other non-protein components in it. So think about, if you are say working with chickpea, right, and you're saying that okay, I'm using my chickpea protein to make a final plant-based chicken product, but see if you can also incorporate the chickpea starch or chickpea fiber that is there in order to lend some interesting properties just to better your cost economics.
Yeah, just one quick point here, Siddharth. Actually, somebody asked in the Q&A section that most of these studies are for underutilized crops are not available, which is correct, right? Which is why this is a novel sector and there's not a lot of demonstration of how those functional ingredients or proteins would work in the end product. And that is not something we are testing here. But like Siddharth mentioned in this point, the waste utilization. If you're thinking of a specific Indian crop, have you really thought of the economies of scale? Because there are a lot of other components coming out as well from that crop. Are they currently being utilized in any other industry? Are you accounting for that? That's just one very small pointer if you really think about it. And such pointers are available at throughout the processing value chain. So equally, it's important that that protein is going to work for you, but nobody, like no company can work in a silo, right? It has to really think of its cost economics and how those other ingredients, maybe you have to supply it to some other industry, maybe you find some other application for it. Can it directly feeds into a very nice utilization of that crop by under a scheme of government of India? Just throwing data out there for you to think out loud about such points. Very, very critical insight here from Siddharth. So just wanted to point that out. Thank you, Siddharth. Please continue.
Thank you, Shardul. Okay, so once you have your protein isolate ready, it's not just about the protein isolate, right? So if you look at meat, typical chicken flavor or a typical pork flavor or etc. also comes from the fattiness and the flavor components in it. So there are other things that you need to optimize for too. If you look at products out in the market, like the Beyond Burger or Impossible Burger, a lot of times they use a blend between unsaturated fat and saturated fat to get that right amount of fattiness in your product. So understanding which type of oils can you use to make your final product. Secondly, also identifying which types of binders can you use, because a lot of these products are frozen. And when you freeze thaw something, you guys might know that there's a lot of synergies and your product breaks apart. So you need to have the right functional ingredients to bind your products together. So people use starches, fibers, gums. Methyl cellulose is typically used by a lot of companies for this, but methyl cellulose is not a very clean label, friendly ingredient. So when you're writing your proposal, think about if you can use any ingredients which would make your products have a cleaner label. So another big white space opportunity. You need to have the right color, the right flavor to your product. A lot of times people are using beet juice as coloring agent because it is red in color when raw, but when you heat it, it undergoes Maillard browning and it turns into brownish layer, which people typically see in their animal-based products. Impossible actually uses another platform called fermentation platform, which I was mentioning earlier, and it creates this product called soy like hemoglobin, which gives the right flavor and right color to your product. And I think we have a slide next to kind of talk about it. So, yep, here it is. So essentially, the concept here is that Impossible Foods figured out that it is the heme in an animal which gives the color and the flavor, that meaty flavor, what you think. Then they basically figured out that in the roots of a soybean plant, the same compound heme is found, which can still give the same color and flavor to a plant-based meat product too. So initially they thought, okay, can we just extract this heme from the roots of the soybean plant and then put it in our product? But then that defeats the whole purpose, right? Because you'll need to keep uprooting so many soybean plants around the globe just for this one small component, which did not work, for sustainability reasons. Then they figured out, okay, why can't I take the DNA from the soybean plant and actually plant it inside a yeast, and then make the yeast grow in a fermenter, so that and this yeast can produce heme, and I can just open up the yeast and fractionate the yeast and extract the heme from it and then use it in my plant-based meat products. And this approach has worked for them because essentially they found out that through this process, the heme what they got was exactly similar to the heme which is actually present in animals. And this is their USP. I believe they have patented this soy like hemoglobin, as they call it. They have also gotten GRAS approval from FDA. So it's working well. It's for them. So this is the beauty of fermentation platform too. So whenever you're making plant-based ingredients, and if you can combine it with any fermentation-based ingredients.
So just a quick point here, if anybody is really thinking of such a solution, you also have to consider the regulatory aspects of it, right? How they would be in India, for example, are there any significant challenges? Because if you have a brilliant solution, but if you think you've studied FSSAI's regulatory mandates and you feel that that probably will be a problem, like GMOs are completely banned in India in some cases. This is not GMO, but I'm just giving you an example, right? Soy, like hemoglobin, is not a GMO product and it's GRAS approved, like Siddharth was telling from FDA. But things like that have to be really thought through when you're really thinking of a innovative proposal.
Thank you, Shardul. Okay. So post that, then it moves to ingredient optimization. It's also about optimizing for flavors, optimizing for your fats. And I'll tell you an issue that typically comes when you're developing plant-based meat products. First of all, it is very hard to get the right flavor in, the right chicken flavor, because chicken or any other animal product, it's not like they have one flavor, right? If you do a gas chromatography on it, you'll see hundreds of volatile compounds, which in proper ratio actually makes up that chicken flavor or pork flavor, etc. So first identifying which are these compounds essentially, which are contributing the most to a plant-based meat flavor is very important, and different companies use different techniques. Gas chromatography is a common technique wherein the individual volatile compounds are identified, and then flavor companies actually work to create these flavor molecules in a non-animal based ways. That's important. Secondly, what happens is, even though you have got some sort of a flavor profile and you add it to your product, it's typically extremely volatile. And what happens is, in your processing stage or in your shelf life stage, it just dissipates. So in your final product, there is still no meat like flavor, which is a challenge. So a lot of companies are actually working on flavor encapsulation technologies, wherein your flavor molecules are encapsulated typically within fats or carbohydrates, and they are released only when you're cooking the product at home or when you're consuming it, which is very interesting too. So something to keep in mind as you're optimizing your ingredients of flavors too. Now, in terms of end product optimization, so now you have your proteins, you have your fats, you have your binders, you have your flavors, etc. So how do you mix them to get the right plant-based meat product? And here, the big part is process. You need to have the right process to mix all these ingredients together, to texturize it in a right way, etc., which is going to give you the final plant-based meat product having the same organoleptic properties as its animal-based counterpart. A technology that is being used, which is commercial right now, is extrusion technology. There are two ways of going about this. There is something called low moisture extrusion, which is essentially used to create minced products. So you can think about uh, keema like products in India, or patties or sausages, etc., where I can have my meat in a mashed format, but then I can just form it in the form of patties or sausages or etc., where the structure is not really important because it's always in a mashed format. Uh, though it should still have the right amount of chewiness, the right amount of resistance to your bite, etc. The second way of going about it is high moisture extrusion, and this technology is something that has come up, a lot in the last 3-4 years, wherein People, when they extrude, they use high amount of water and high amount of fat right in the process, and what that gives is a very stringy meat like structure. So you can see the difference, right? You can in the For low moisture extrusion technology, you can think about kima like products, whereas for high moisture extrusion technology, you can look at this product made by this Dutch company called Oja, and you can see how fibrillar it is to really get your that real kebab like structure, etc. And here is an interesting research done by this company called Bueller, which is essentially an equipment manufacturer, and it also makes extruders. And herein, what they did was they used soybean, so soya protein, to make a high moisture extruded product. Then they moved to pea protein. Then they used a blend of sunflower soybean. So it's a very big study, and you can, Shardul, maybe we can share this white paper with them so that they can take a look at it. And then they essentially compared different
Yeah, sounds
parameters
good.
of this. Yep. They compared different parameters. So they compared how does a pea protein high moisture extrudate compare with a say a fava bean, high protein extrudate in terms of its protein content, amino acid profile, price, texture, mouthfeel, taste, color, etc. And the results, what you see here, they are not set in stone, right? Because most of you guys, like, if you have done product development, you can see that I run one type of process and I get a certain product. But now I increase the RPM in my extruder, or I increase the moisture content a bit, or I change the temperature of processing and I get a completely different product. So that is the beauty of food science. So here is, they have gotten this chart based on certain set processing parameters and ingredient parameters, but you can also change this. But what this gives is a good idea of the kind of experiments you could do with different proteins out there, and different extruder conditions, which is beautiful. And it just needs a lot more optimization to get your final plant-based meat product. Now, in addition to extrusion, there are also other technologies that are being researched upon by universities around the globe, by industry around the globe. One such technology is called shear cell technology. This is being researched on by Wageningen University in the Netherlands. So you can go on their website and see what kind of research is going on. An advantage of this technology is that with extrusion, your thickness of your meat is always limited because of the die that comes at the end of the extruder. But with shear cell technology, you can actually get chunks of meat, which, and then you can cut it in different pieces, etc. So, which is an advantage of this technology. There is also 3D printing technology. People are using 3D printers to actually print meat. And there is this company called Nova Meats based out of Spain. But now there are also companies based out of Israel and US which are using 3D printing to actually print their meat. So very interesting. Please do go and check their websites out too. But then, in terms of your writing your proposals, right? You can always think that, extrusion is something that is commercial, that has been optimized for quite some time now. So its cost economics have also been worked out. Shear cell technology, 3D printing technology, very novel, but still not commercial. So, if you have your proposals written around this, it would add a novelty factor for sure, but then you also need to justify it with your cost economics and how you're going to scale it up. So something just to think about as you're going through the process.
Yeah, so just a quick addition here, if somebody's thinking about designing equipment for 3D printing of plant-based meats, you can obviously, nobody has, possibly you won't be able to go out and get some data on whether it's going to work, whether your suggested modification to bring the cost down of 3D printers might not work in practical world, but you might have an idea of comparables, right? Whether similar setup of a 3D printer that you're planning to innovate in your fifth category, is that something which has been previously used for protein rich products, or have there been comparables of fibrous structures that have come out of it? Like those citations with that research, maybe it's secondary research, could really help further your case. If you're building your whole idea or proposal on creating equipment for 3D printing which is cost effective compared to current ones, that's just one way of thinking about it, even though this is a theoretical proposal. So hope, and this thing applies for pretty much every solution that you're looking to go ahead and do.
Right. Thank you, Shardul. Okay, so now let's look at two of the products out there in the market and kind of deconstruct them to understand, why did they use a certain ingredient, or what processing must they have used to get this product. First is the Impossible Burger. Again, this is a minced product. They have, used low moisture extrusion and formed it into patties. And you see that they have used a total of 21 ingredients to actually replicate a traditional beef patty. And if you look at these ingredients now, they are into different buckets. So they have used a combination of soy protein concentrate, soy protein isolate, and potato protein to actually make this low moisture extrudate, the image of which you can see at the bottom of your screen. And this is very interesting, right? Because traditionally it's always been soy protein that has been used to make these low moisture extrudates. So even in the products that you see in India, right, like all the soya nuggets and all of these, this is also a form of low moisture extrusion, but these have not really been optimized to get a plant-based meat-like texture. So even if I take these extrudates found in India and I hydrate it, the kind of chew I'm going to get, the kind of texture I'm going to get is not going to be similar to a meat-like product. And this is where Impossible innovated, right? They used a blend of different proteins. They added a potato protein to it, which is a functional protein. They maybe modified the extrusion parameters to get the right type of low moisture extrudate, which when hydrated can give you the right beef-like texture. They also used a blend of fats. They use coconut oil and sunflower oil. Again, coconut oil because it's high in its saturated fat content and gives the right amount of fattiness. They use binders, methyl cellulose, modified starch, potato protein to bind all the ingredients together, contribute to texture, give a good freeze-thaw stability to product, etc. Because their products are frozen. In terms of colorants, as I was mentioning earlier, soy leg hemoglobin is what they have used to give the right color. For the flavoring too, there is soy like hemoglobin out there, but in addition to it, they have used different blends of natural flavors and yeast extracts. And then they have used some combination of vitamins and minerals to fortify the product, and also some preservatives. And if you visit their lab in San Francisco Bay Area, and if you ask for a product demo, they actually do a demo of product in front of you. So you see your low moisture extrudate, then you see all the other ingredients basically in the form of slurry. You mix it together, you form it, you cook it, and you have it. So very interesting. And you can see that each and every ingredient that they have used, that's for a purpose. So again, when you are going through your product development analysis and thinking of ingredients, try to look at ingredients which are functional and can contribute to bettering your product. Same is the case with Beyond Burger. Again, they use a different blend of proteins and they use 18 ingredients again to get a similar plant-based beef patty. And here, instead of using the soy and potato proteins, what Impossible use, Beyond uses a combination of pea protein, rice protein, and mung bean protein, again to create a low moisture extrudate. And then they blend it with other ingredients as you see on the screen. Again, in terms of fats, they are using a blend of coconut oil, canola oil, but they also use cocoa butter. And then cocoa butter is something, it's very interesting. So typically, if people look at beef-like patties, you'll see like some sort of fat, granulated fat everywhere, and this is called marbling. And essentially, Beyond realized that people also look at marbling when they are when they want to cook their patties, etc. So they added cocoa butter to get that marbling experience. They use functional ingredients like methyl cellulose, potato starch, sodium chloride, and potassium chloride for various purposes, maybe as a buffer, for freeze-thaw stability, texture contribution, etc. And then a blend of different colors and flavors. Okay, so the companies working in this sector, and as Shardul was mentioning, right, there are two different categories. There are definitely companies like Beyond Meat, Impossible, Corn, Garden Gourmet, this is a brand by Nestle, etc., which are making the final products. But in order to support all these companies, there are also companies making ingredients. So if you look at companies like DuPont, these are, global heavyweights making, plant-based proteins, plant-based starches, etc., all contributing to your end products. There are companies like Trophic, which are actually exploring sources like seaweed and microalgae to actually make your proteins to see that if anything can be done over there. Then we have AAK, which specializes in plant-based fats and functional fats in your products. Then we have companies like Klextral, Wenger, etc., and Bueller, as you saw it, which make the machines needed to make the final plant-based meat product. So you can also think about this. You can focus on the final product, or you can focus on the ingredients, or you can focus on the technology that is being used to create these products. The spectrum is wide open right now. Now, in terms of value chain, this is kind of just highlighting the whole process, how it goes when you're creating a product. First, crop characterization and optimization, as we spoke about, ingredient processing, your raw material optimization, and your end product optimization. But it doesn't end with that. This is just phase one of, getting your product. Post that, you also need to manufacture it, which is a very big science in itself. A lot of times people can get good products on a lab scale, but when they scale it up, it all falls apart in terms of texture and flavor. So, when you're designing, your proposal, etc., also think about methods and ingredients which have shown scalability. Uh, Post that, safety, Q&A and regulatory. And this is what Shardul was mentioning a little. In general, you have your food safety practices, your food quality management, your food quality control practices. But even in addition to that, say if you're using a novel ingredient, you need to go through a GRAS approval, or if it is in India, it needs to be approved by FSSAI, which is a procedure. So have all this in your mind and add it to your, your launch timelines, because you cannot launch a product if FSSAI has not approved a certain ingredient, etc. Branding and marketing. It's very important to market and brand your products in the right way, in order to get the most consumer traction and acceptance. Financing and business services. A lot of these things, ingredients, processes, just launching a company is very capital intensive. If you want to buy extruders from European companies, they can cost you in crores, even for a lab scale extruder. And manufacturing extruders are even more expensive. So you need to raise money in order to do this. So it's very important that you need to have like a sound financial and business planning as you are developing your products. And in the end, your products need to go through a brokerage, through a distribution channel in order to reach maximum amount of customers and consumers. And this is very important to, I've seen companies, making their products right, but then not figuring out their warehouses, or not figuring out the supply chain, the cold chain, etc., and losing products, or along the way, or just spending a lot of money in this supply chain management, because of which their whole cost system falls apart, etc. In the end, you can sell it via food service channels, which is essentially in cafes, in like schools, restaurants in bulk quantity, or you can go to retail where you're selling it to individual customers. And this again depends on how you want to market your product and what is the financial cost of your product. Now, coming to the last part of the presentation is just the market, right? And this is a global phenomenon. Alternative proteins, meat alternatives are going mainstream around the globe. Uh, you know, every food service location like Burger King, is going to, it launched with the Impossible Whopper, and last year, there was Impossible said, or even Burger King issued a statement that it is going to be having Whoppers in each and every store in the US by the end of the year. This year, because of COVID, a lot of things have taken a hit. But again, we see that one of the reasons COVID happened was because of, again, the whole animal industry. And essentially, this COVID has also shown us that alternative proteins are the way to go ahead, and they are the only means of feeding growing population by 2050. So even though you can see a slight slump globally in the markets, it is going to pick back up soon. Beyond Meat also had one of the most successful IPOs of 2019, and I believe also one of the most successful tech IPOs in the last 20 years. War of the Burgers, different food service channels like Burger King, Subway, Tim Hortons, McDonald's, Hard Rock Cafe are actually fighting for these burgers. Like, everyone wants to launch Beyond with them, everyone wants to launch Impossible with them. And similar would be the trend in India too, once we get good products like Beyond and Impossible in the market over here. And it's not just the startups which are in the space, also the big companies are in this space. So Nestle, either they are launching their own brands or they are buying stakes in plant-based meat companies, because they don't want to here is an interesting statement, right? I think which Tyson had issued. They said that we don't want to be opposed this field, we actually want to contribute to this field if this is the future, etc. So that shows that people around the globe and even in traditional meat companies are realizing the need for this industry. And this kind of just is a good graph showing how plant-based meat has taken an inflection in food service. So if you look at 2017, you know there were hardly any joints which were offering plant-based burgers. But then go to 2019, you can see more than 25,000 locations actually offering plant-based meat products, which is great. And similarly in retail, it's not just food service. There are different retail stores which have taken in plant products from plant-based meat companies. And again, if you look at just compare 2017 to 2019, you can just see the amount of traction plant-based meat products have received. So there is a tremendous opportunity in plant-based meat segment, and it is just bound to grow every year over the next years. And so it is a really good time to be in this segment, and different aspects of the segment, being product development, business development in India, around the globe. And we are very glad that all of you are interested in contributing to the smart protein sector and are a part of the challenge. And yeah, wishing you all the best as we go ahead And Shardul, I'm done with my presentation. I can take in any questions if there are any.
Awesome. So now, quick request to all the attendees. Please feel free to submit questions in the Q&A section. Be very detailed. I've commented on a question that this is an example of a good question, right? Just tie in some context. Tell us how you're thinking. Because other than that, just a one-line question asking how to make plant-based meats is not just going to be useful for anybody, right? At the end of the day, I'm till then, while you're submitting your questions, I'm going to take some of the questions which are already here. Um, so one question is about, do we have to mention all the details of plant-based meat value chain? This is a good question, and I think the answer is simple. If you see the evaluation criteria, majority, you'll start with problem statement and then the rationale of your solution. There's 30 points right there. And I think the key is defining the problem statement. You saw just the value chain is so complex. There are so many opportunities, and you cannot say, like, some people have texted me and asked, can we submit two products? I mean, it's a 5-page proposal, and if you're thinking of two products, then you'll be really good. Otherwise, I would recommend everyone to just focus on a very specific area as your problem statement, which you have understood through your studies in phase one, or talking to people, or just your own original insights into, okay, this is a specific area which is a big bottleneck for the industry. This is what I want to do to solve it. That is as simple as that. So defining the problem statement is one of the most important things, I feel, and then accordingly rest of your proposal will take shape. But because it's just 5 pages, you have to be focused on ensuring that it's very specific. Otherwise you'll just be all over the place, and probably you'll lose out qualifying for the next round. Also, some key insights are, if you're ever citing anything, any data, any insights, make sure that you have citations. If you don't know how to cite, Google up things, bibliography, all of that. You can easily do it in Google Documents while you're creating your 5 pages. So those was just some general insights. So that there are some questions here. Yeah, can we propose more than one plant-based meat product, right? So that's what I was just answering. It's up to you. We don't want to limit it. If you feel that's the best way of presenting your solution, why not? Maybe you're thinking of a specific ingredient which has applications in 4 different products. Why not? Please feel free to mention them based on whatever the secondary research you've done. But again, focus is, I think, super important, and most of the winning proposals will advance to the next stage, will offer some sort of a laid out path towards achieving that into after spending one more month on it. So 5 page mein aap bata doge ki these are things we are doing to achieve a solution to that specific problem. And then obviously in phase 3, if it's a great idea, you'll further work on it to improve it and make it into a 15-page proposal. So that's my answer for, can we do more than 4. So suppose we have a secret recipe, should we reveal it in the proposal? Siddharth, do you want to talk about recipes, formulations, IPs just in general, how much people should reveal, all of that?
Yeah. Uh, so that's an interesting question, right? So I think the way I would like to answer it is that there are uh, there are two things, right? I mean, if you are in general, if companies are filing an IP for something, usually they have to disclose everything. When they are filing a patent on it, they need to say that this is exactly the formulation I used, these are the conditions I used, and this is the functional ingredient I got. So in that way, it is technically public knowledge, but the way in general patents are written is that they do a lot of experiments over a lot of conditions in order to still safeguard what they are exactly doing. So that is the way they go about it. Uh, Shardul, in terms of
Recipes, yeah, just recipes, and just if you're thinking that you'll add 10 ingredients and the combination of those 10 ingredients is your IP, that's not how usually it works. You
yeah,
cannot really patent it either. In terms of confidentiality, we are not going to make your proposals public, the 5 pages. Obviously we are going to evaluate them, the external judges would see it, obviously. But like I said, there's no real IP, to be very, very honest, in a 5-page proposal, or even in a 15-page proposal for that matter, because those are really complex processes. And I think just formulations or just ingredients and recipes are definitely not a problem. So you can definitely include them, and rest assured, be tension free about it. There's one more question here.
And adding on to what Shardul said, I think, if in order to file for patents and stuff, you need extensive testing, repeatability of results being shown, and it's a very elaborate process. So as Shardul was mentioning, if it's a 5-page proposal, really, I would assume the chances for patenting anything would be fairly low. So
Yeah,
and again, as Shardul mentioned, everything is confidential with us. It's just the judges who are going to evaluate your proposals.
yeah. I mean, if it's like a trade secret recipe of sorts, which you feel is very, very important, then that's what they say. Maybe you don't have to give the specifications or try to mask it as much as you can if you feel that it's gonna risk in any way your secret recipe. Great. There's one more question in the Q&A bit. Siddharth, you want to take that? The upvoted one.
Yeah, let me see. So plant base. Okay.
So I'll just quickly read it out. Plant-based meat still somewhat fails to complete the requirements of mouthfeel and becomes a bit dry at the end of mastication, since there's a huge chance of fats getting leaked while cooking, unlike animal meat, in which fats are encapsulated in adipocytes. So if we are considering fat encapsulation in our product, do we have to mention the whole idea of how we are going to do the same, or simply mention it? Also, can upcoming fat encapsulators be used? Slightly technical, I can give an overview, which is basically, if your idea is based, like the whole proposal is based on fat encapsulation, I think you should go into details and mention as much as you can, specify it. But if you feel that's just maybe a small part of the overall proposal, then maybe you can skip mentioning a lot of details about it. From a science perspective, I'll let Siddharth answer this.
No, I agree with Shardul. I mean, if your whole USP of your proposal is that plant-based chicken flavor is typically lost during processing or shelf life, and in my plant-based chicken product which I'm proposing, I'm using an encapsulation technology, which is going to retain the flavor till the consumer actually consumes it. So then please do mention it in detail, because when judges look at it, they would like to evaluate in detail that whether what you have proposed is actually going to do the job or not. And please cite the citations, the research papers that you are using to make this proposal, that this will work or not work. So but if it is just one minor ingredient, just one minor USP in your process, then you could just mention it with less details and focus on the main USP of your product. Can upcoming technologies be used? Of course. I think that is the need of the hour, right? What has typically been done for years and years now. We need to innovate, and we need to create new technologies which are going to give us the right organoleptic properties as traditional animal products. So please to mention it. That would also just add to your proposal that you mentioned something which others have not, essentially.
Yeah, so simply putting it out there, not just in up and coming fat encapsulators, it could be masking agents, it could be shelf life extending ingredients specifically for the plant-based sector, and many companies around the globes, which are MNCs in ingredients, are launching those. So we see that as an effort, right? You going researching out there, which are the latest solutions for plant-based meats and incorporating those. So that's definitely a value addition. So think as advanced as you could, but again, it has to be balanced with cost, because if it's advanced, it's probably expensive. Is it fitting into the whole scheme of things? Those are some points you have to think better about. One more question is, Indian supply chain is highly reliant on fresh conventional meat, which is true, which is one of the insights we also saw with our session with Dhruvi and Raji, right? Again, shelf stability becomes super important, like I said, which is also one of the factors in phase 3 as a evaluation criteria, whether it's shelf stability because of I don't know, some of the organoleptic properties going down, or is this overall shelf stability of the product? Can you do something there? Are good ways to think about injecting or introducing plant-based meats in India, especially for tier 2 tier 3 cities. That was another question. Maybe the next question, I don't know. This is a vague question, but can you talk about some challenges? While I mean, it's really vague question, Siddharth.
Hmm.
So it's really up to you how to take it.
So what are the on ground challenges which can come in front of us when developing a plant-based meat product? So I think the challenges could be a lot, right? I mean, on ground challenges. So like I was mentioning earlier, right? I've looked at companies which have done everything right, right till the end. They have a good product. They have been able to scale up to. But one thing which they don't figure out is the supply chain. So essentially, once they make their products, and if their products are frozen, maybe they have a frozen warehouse immediately post manufacturing, but then they realize, okay, I just can't ship it to different, cities and, around the country, because, there just doesn't exist a frozen supply chain. And once they start implementing it, the cost just shoot up. So then they realize, okay, my initial costing for the product doesn't hold up anymore. So this is one of the on ground challenges that comes up. One of the other on ground challenges is, you can have a really good product at the lab scale, but then you go to the manufacturing level, and then you figure out, okay, the texture is totally off, the flavor is totally off. What has gone wrong? So you always need to do a pilot scale experiment and a manufacturing experiment to always keep validating what you're doing at lab scale, so that at the end of 6 months of lab work, you don't realize that what you're doing is not at all scalable. That's one of the challenges that you can come across. uh, Challenge that you can come across is, if you're working with a third party co-manufacturer, you develop a certain process, etc., and then you realize the equipment what they have, doesn't fit your needs. So essentially you have to like modify the entire process just to fit the co-manufacturer's equipment needs. So there are different things that can go wrong in developing your product. Oh, what can happen sometimes is, you are working with a soy protein isolate or wheat protein isolate with a certain supplier, and then you develop products. You also make a few manufacturing batches, and then you realize that this particular supplier is unable to match up to your demands of your product. So then you change your supplier, and then you realize that now this product has a different texture, different flavor, etc. So now you have to again do some part of the R&D process again. So all these are, things that you learn as you are starting to develop your products and you go through the process. And many of them can be avoided, which is the point of this proposal too. Like when you're writing your proposal, always think about the things that can go wrong and how you're addressing for it.
Yeah, and again, like I said, you have to justify it only theoretically with smart, educated guesses. So we all understand that, nobody's going out and doing these things firsthand and gathering data and deriving insights from it, right? Um, One more question is, can we use these proteins in whole form, like flour form? Have you seen any of those cases? Or is it necessary to use them in concentrate, isolate forms only? Like just some insights there.
Yeah, so typically what happens is, if you look at texture, right? So if you have carbohydrates, starches, or fibers, their texture is different from the texture of a protein. And when you have meat, animal meat products, look at their carbohydrate content, right? It is nil, or it is very close to nil. So they don't have a lot of carbs in them. So if you want to create a product which needs to be in a similar texture as your animal counterpart, also you need to have a product which is very high in protein and very low in carbs. So if you use flours, which are typically, about 50% carbohydrates or more, then what happens is you get this carbohydrate starchy texture which is not desirable in your final product, and that is why, typically protein isolates, or if not protein concentrates, are used in your final products.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, there is a question around flavoring ingredients. Um, is it necessary that it must be unique, or are we free to use certain variety of available ingredients in the market? I think the simple answer to that is go for ingredients that are available in the market. Again, the same answers would be repeated, right? If it's really novel, is there supply? Do you think its research is gonna make that specific ingredient available in the market in the next 1 year? Has it been launched or done some sort of a pilot testing by some flavor company? Maybe it's done. Maybe they have not tried it in India, but they have tried it in the Europe market or Singapore market. Just look at all of those insights and see the feasibility of choosing that ingredient. And obviously, cost is an important factor for that. So think if it's going to be too expensive, are they not going to supply in India at all? What are the minimum order quantities for those ingredients? Is it going to justify setting up a venture around it? Would those costs fall down? Again, there are some ways of finding it. Maybe speaking to people who are in the industry. If you feel that that is too much to do, draw comparables. This is similar ingredient, similar cost, similar availability, but at if you order 500 kgs of it, the costs are justified. Just think through all of those, aspects, and I think at the end of the day, that's really up to you. Anything to add here, Siddharth?
No, I think that That is pretty comprehensive. A lot of times, the approach what company takes is, they actually work with flavor companies to co-develop products for their needs. Uh, and that's a good approach, right? Because if you're forming a team, your core expertise could be proteins, or your core expertise could be extrusion, etc. But it's very difficult to have all expertises in your company, right? Unless you have raised a lot of money, etc., etc. So a lot of times, what a lot of startups do is they work with company flavor houses like IFF, Givaudan, etc., and actually co-develop flavors with them. So that's another approach that you can do. So even though it is not available on shelf, you can still, work with them for a year and develop flavors which are specific to your product.
Yeah, I think we answered two questions. One was about flavors, which was similar, and then other was about using ingredients, which might not be available in the Indian market. Again, there's no great answer to it. Honestly, I think just all the insights I've been speaking about apply to those. So similarly, somebody's asking about equipments and expensive machinery for product development that is required, a high capital expenditure. In what depth do we have to provide that data in the proposal? If you're thinking about doing that. So again, category wise, if you're looking after protein isolation as a whole idea, then obviously the cost of protein isolation equipment would be a major factor for consideration. But if you're just looking at setting up a line for processing of certain plant-based meat product, then all of those equipments which are key, and maybe Siddharth can talk about some of these things as well. You'll have to mention those all key equipments is what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, so if you want to develop a plant-based meat product, right, I think the biggest and the most important equipment is your texturization equipment. And as I was mentioning earlier, extrusion is something that is commercial. Other technologies are still upcoming, so you will have to figure, you'll need a lab scale extruder first for experimentation purposes, and then you'll also either need to buy a manufacturing scale extruder if you're planning to make it in-house, or you need to work with co-manufacturing facilities which have a manufacturing scale extruder. An extruder is a pretty expensive equipment, so that is something you need to account for. But in addition to extruder, the other equipments, what you need is, you need a Hobart mixer to essentially mix up all your ingredients together. You need forming machines. So if you're making sausages, you need sausage making machines. If you're making patties, you need patty forming machines, etc. And yeah, you need to have basic like grills, ovens, etc., through which you can test your products. Basic pH meters, conductivity meters, uh, rheometers, etc., to test your dough and final product properties. So there is a fair bit of equipment that is needed, and this is especially important, I would say, because a product like plant-based meat is a pretty technical product. It's not product which is non-technical, something like biscuits, or like you can think of these products, right? The technology has existed for long, uh, but these are technical products. People are still trying to figure out what are your quality control parameters, and your quality control parameters for your product would be different from what is out there in the market. So you need to have your own equipments in order to set these processing parameters in place, and thus comes the need of equipments, because humans typically tend to make errors but equipments do not.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I think Sahaj asked it's a tricky question. I think if again like don't I would say don't go into too much depth. Don't do like an entire cost analysis of 10 equipments and comparables, because that's just too much effort for a 5-page proposal. And again, that wouldn't really convey a lot of insights, right? I think as long as you can cite it by saying, okay, this is what we found online. This is the best way of going on about it. I think you should be in a good region to submit your proposal and not worry that it's going to get negatively judged against you. One question is about biofortification. Can it be explored to get nutritionally adequate plant species specifically for developing products in our sector? Just some insights on biofortification maybe.
Yeah, so I would say you can look at Icrisat's website. I believe they have developed zinc fortified pearl millet and iron fortified finger millet or iron fortified sorghum. Something of don't quote me on my sentences, but it is possible, and these varieties are out there in the market. For you to buy, make products with them. So biofortification has been explored. From a micronutrient standpoint, it is in process, as I mentioned earlier, right? There are companies in Israel, companies in the US, which have increased the nutrition profile or bettered the nutrition profile of crops, increased the protein content of crops essentially with the end goal of making them available for alternative protein products and other products out in the industry. So yes, it can be explored to get good products in the end.
Yeah, and there are many other universities doing it. So it's all about doing research and validating that assumption that you've put for fortifying your ingredients or plant species to get a good end product. Again, this is a complex question, so you'll have to think a lot about its application. Processing would probably affect a lot of those biofortified ingredients, and we don't know, right? Will there? So again, in that case, your thinking should be: if my process is XYZ, which is high heat, and I have an XYZ ingredient which is biofortified, is that heat gonna, mess up with that micronutrient fortification or whatever the crop is fortified with or the ingredient is fortified with? One more question is from Shreya. Siddharth, if you look at it, basically it's talking about how product sensory aspects get affected after extrusion, post extrusion processing, and how does that affect shelf stability. So in general, if you could just share some insights here, which might be useful for all participants, I think, like smoking, frying, roasting, etc.
Yeah, so see, one advantage with products which are fried, roasted, smoked is that you can actually add additional flavors post the extrusion process. Uh, and you can think about this, right? I mean, once you bread something, even in your traditional animal-based products, and then now there is that coating of masalas or whatever, and then it just gives a good flavor, and that is an advantage because when it comes to a lot of like plant-based products, there is still inherently some planty flavor, some grassy notes, etc. And something like breading, etc., helps remove that plantiness, or at least you don't perceive it, which is always great. So in general it is preferred, but then again it depends on your product. Right now it becomes a breaded product, but if you want to just have a plain high moisture extruded product which your customer or consumer can grill on the pan, then you don't want it to be breaded. Then you'll have to probably be more careful about the flavor composition in your product, because your consumer, as soon as he grills or he or she grills it, he or she is going to perceive that planty flavor, etc. So there are both advantages and disadvantages. Does that answer your question, or did I miss anything?
Yeah, so I think the question was coming with the background that, so to be honest, Shreya, there are multiple technologies and multiple processing methods which are employed post extrusion. In some cases, post extrusion, you get a near to final product, but always, like, a lot of these processing methods completely can change the organoleptic properties or the functionality of some of the ingredients. So that's why you have to think of those post processing and pre processing, and obviously the shelf stability, so that it does not disintegrate in the value chain, um, or during distribution. I think all of those pieces have to be really thought through, and that's why all of these things fall together in a place. And the most sensible process or the most sensible approach would obviously be the one who will get a competitive edge in judging. Okay, so that was that. Any other questions you want to take from the current ones? People, we have some more time. If you have any more questions, please submit them through the Q&A section.
So I think there is a question by Swaroop. Is there any other technology other than extruders or shear cell which we can look for? So you can look at this technology called spinning. I believe certain companies around the globe are again working or looking at spinning as an alternative to extrusion. Again, because extrusion is capital intensive, and even through spinning, they are able to get those sort of threaded or fiber-like structures. So you can take a look at that too.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, that's the whole point of the challenge, right? You're going out there and really understanding if there are technologies which people have not. So nothing's happening in a silo, right? All over the world, most things are out there. And you're right. Most of the research that might have happened in the past 3-4 years, which is still getting published, which is still getting patented, you might you might not find that on Google. But the key here is to just understand: are there any comparables of other technologies being used to texturize maybe feed products which are not fit for human consumption? Can they be used? Are there any other food processing methods which have an element of texturizing in them, just like extrusion? Can they be used? I think that's all part of the challenge, and we won't go into a lot of details uh, for explaining those things. But I think it's worth finding. If you find a really inexpensive way of processing food, which is currently being used for other categories of food, and you can try and apply it for this sector, I think that's a key idea, and you should definitely pursue it. That would definitely differentiate a proposal. For example, rather than everybody saying Hoy moisture extrusion or everybody saying shear cell technology, you get the idea. Another interesting way is just don't think about machinery, maybe think about the conditioning of ingredients before they go into processing. Is there any enzyme conditioning that could really improve your texture? Are there any other I don't know, unit processes that could improve the quality of your base ingredient so that the end product is improved through the use of similar machinery which already exists there? Just throwing it out there. Maybe yes, maybe not, but that's something you have to really think. Any other insight here or next question, Siddharth?
We have a question by Varun, essentially asking that because isolates and concentrates undergo a wet extraction process, would you think these ingredients can still have a clean label value proposition on plant protein products? So I believe that, if you look at Ripple, right? Ripple uses a proprietary pea protein isolate in their products, and just uses mung bean protein isolate in their products. Like that is how they are labeled. So they still, are clean labels, and unless you have high quantities of substances in your final product, then probably you'll have to label it. But otherwise, I think it should be fine. Plus, companies are also aware of this now, so even when they are doing the wet extraction process, they try to use ingredients or processing aids which are label friendly, and there are options available in the market for this. So if your category is category 5, which is developing plant-based ingredients, and if you're doing that, always look at using processing aids or processing ingredients which are label friendly, and not something which would not look good on the label.
Awesome. We are kind of getting towards the end of the webinar. We still have 13 minutes. If you have questions, submit them now so that I can account for them. I think there are just a couple of them, and it's just ready to eat sector, scope, data available. So to be honest, anybody who's approaching us with data specific for Indian market, we covered this in webinar 1 at length. Make sure that you watch it so that you understand what data exists, what doesn't exist, and what innovative ways you can employ to get some data if you really need to do that. Nitin, I would request you to just go through the first webinar again. If you want to draw parallels between RTE and plant-based meat as a product category, then find data of equivalent products maybe and use it as pseudo data. That's just one way of tackling that problem. But again, we'll look at your approach and not the exactness of what is being proposed by you in your proposal here. So again, rest assured. Okay, I think we are out of questions. Almost all questions we've answered. If you have any more questions, we'll just wait for a couple of minutes for you to submit them. Otherwise, we can call it a day. And just a couple of quick announcements. I see that a lot of primary members were here from different teams, but it's always our request that you make sure that at least one member or two members from each team is present for each of the webinars, because there are multiple webinars lined up and it just becomes difficult to catch up with everything else going on, with your daily schedule. So if you just pile up, it's going to happen, right? I'll keep sending these recordings, and then 5 webinars would be left, and you'll be at 15th of September or 17th of September. And the deadline would be 8 days, and you'd be really frantically looking through all of these webinars to develop insights. That's not how it's really done. You have to be really present in the moment, think through things, and do your secondary research to derive insights out of these webinars. Both of these things work hand in hand. So that's something I just wanted to quickly tell. I don't see any more questions. Wow, okay. Font size, to be very, very honest, if you've taken a look at the proposal, guidelines sent to you, you'll find all of these details. Font size, exact font that you should use, because we know all of these questions would come in. What if we use smaller font size? Can we fit in more data? No. That's why we have said we'll disqualify any proposals who don't stick to exact font size and font guidelines and citation guidelines and all of the image use. Because some people will just try to fill up the proposal with images, or some people will just create a Google Drive link and then link in those images. So there are multiple ways around all of these things nowadays. But to be honest, that's why you have to be really careful of what's mentioned in the guidelines provided already. And I'll request you to do that, Dinesh. Okay, great. That's just a thank you. So I guess we are at the end. We'll just still stay for a minute or so. If you have any questions, please put them in now. Awesome. I don't see any questions. Thank you so much for your time today, everyone. And I really appreciate you joining us. Okay. That's super vague question, to be honest. What are some plant powering solutions? But just to add it, and we've talked about this multiple times on multiple webinars, again, requesting you to go and check the kickoff webinar, but anything like ingredient, technology, equipment, some sort of a specific solution. It could be a regulatory solution. It could be an agency you're creating to facilitate new product development. It could be almost anything that facilitates the first four categories, right? It's not limited just to ingredients. So these are all solutions for diverse problems that don't fit into the first four categories, which would help you solve plant-based meat, plant-based eggs, plant-based dairy, and plant-based seafood. Yeah. Soy leg hemoglobin, is this patented, or can people use it as part of their solution, Siddharth?
Let me check this question again. Is like hemoglobin thing patented? Oh, it is patented by Impossible Foods. So you can license it from them, but I don't think you can use it without that. I mean, that too if they're open to doing that.
Yeah, and again, you should check for the license bit and cite some source if it's publicly available, if you can license it. Things like that. So again, if a company has a patent on a particular thing and you're mentioning it as your key value proposition, and then obviously we, like the judging panel, would have seen hundreds of these companies, and as GFI has been speaking with hundreds of these companies, we have pretty much between the judging panel got covered most of the things that are happening innovative in this sector. So some people were asking, right, how would you really know how to gauge the theoretical viability of a proposal? And Varun clarified this the last time. That's just our expertise. So we'll have some sort of an idea if it makes sense. If we think, oh, hey, I've seen this somewhere, and we Google it and it's already patented, then that just immediately, kind of devalues your idea, because that would say that you have not even Googled your own idea and not even done prior research and understanding if anybody else has already done a lot of that. Again, Tanesh, please submit the question from the Q&A button, but I'll just answer this. Yeah, but then what's the innovation, right? Most people will be doing that. So the question is essentially, if you look at the ingredients currently used in the market and just vary some proportions and just change some basic ingredients, I mean, that's how you really arrive at a new product, to be honest. And that's a very valid part of new product development and thinking things through. But again, the quality of doing that, if you're just looking at some label from a company out of our database of 400 companies and then just changing an ingredient and saying this is our product because it worked for them, will know, and it doesn't make sense. So it'll probably inferior quality of end product of your proposal. Just something to keep in mind. So again, very contextual, depends on what you're offering, how much change you've done in that formulation, how you've justified that change, etc., etc. Okay, I think we are out of questions. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, please don't reach out to me or Siddharth personally on email for any specific questions, because that's the challenge all about. I mean, I just want to be very out forth and open about it, because you might not get a response and then you might feel that we were supposed to answer it, or you might wait for it as a bottleneck to take decisions on your next steps, but that's not something we're doing. I think these webinars, and I think we have 2 more webinars with Siddharth, who is going to cover some more specific aspects. The schedule's already conveyed to you. The webinar tomorrow is very, very important, especially for people who have no background in science and want to understand what are some key elements of product development, process development, ideation, like scientifically, packaging, shelf life. and we are going to cover some, 101, 201 insights with Dr. Matthew Zhao, who is the scientist at Big Idea Ventures. And after that, we are also going to have a small Q&A session with him. So it's going to be a really nice workshop, and I think it's one of the most important ones in the coming days. So definitely make sure that you or other teammates attend it. Great. Have a great, what is it today? Yeah, it's Monday. Great start of a week. I don't even know anymore what day of the week it is. Thank you so much, Siddharth. We really appreciate your time. You're dropping by and helping us with some of the insights on plant-based meat. Um, and thank you so
Yeah,
much for attending today.
yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shardul. This is great, and all the best for the challenge.
Awesome. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.